Planning Applications Committee meeting on Wednesday 23rd of April. It's gone 10:30. I think we are quoted. Can we have Sederunt and apologies, please, Paula?
I have apologies from Councillor Dick and Councillor Groom.
Thank you. Any declarations of interest? Councillor Roy?
I think Councillor Blake has an apology as well.
Any other declarations of interest? Paula, can you take us through the process for the meeting today? A minute of the meeting first. Minute of the meeting of 26th of March 2014. Is that a true and accurate record? Agreed. Thank you. Now process, Paula.
The Planning Applications Committee will consider each application in turn as detailed on the agenda. The case officer or an area planning manager or other appointed officer will make a short statement addressing the determining issues accompanied by digital images. Any late information, amendments or corrections will be reported at this time. Members may ask questions of officers following the presentation on points of clarification. For those applications which are in accordance with Council policy subject to public speaking, then the order of eligible parties being heard will be as follows: third parties objecting to an application, third parties supporting an application, statutory consultees objecting to an application, elected members of Dumfries and Galloway Council who are not members of the Planning Application Committee, and applicants or their agents. The Chairman will individually invite those who have registered in advance to speak in respect of the application to come forward, sit in the reserved seat and make their presentation, after which they may be questioned by committee members. No questions may be asked of members. When each presentation is completed, people should immediately return to their seats. After all the representations have been heard, the meeting is then in formal session and no members of the public may address the committee from the public gallery. The Planning Applications Committee will then proceed to determine the application, or if the application is a major development significantly contrary to the development plan or a national development, agree a recommendation to be made to full council, who will then determine the application. The decision notice will be issued after a period of 48 hours has passed. The Chairman has been provided with a list of eligible representatives who have registered in the period specified in Council policy. These individuals have all had their registration to speak confirmed and no other persons will be allowed to speak. Representatives have been placed in alphabetical order. A copy of the public speaking list is available from the committee officer taking notes of our proceedings. Representations on planning applications must be made on the basis of valid planning matters only. Certain matters are not normally material planning considerations and will not be taken into account by the Council when deciding on a planning application. Representatives are encouraged to use the time allotted to clarify any points they consider material and to address the determining issues. Representatives should not raise any new matter without explaining why it was not raised earlier with the case officer. Please do not repeat what is in the report, as members will have already read the report. Presentations will be strictly limited to 3 minutes per person, excepting for national major developments, which by their very nature are more complex, where the time limit will be 5 minutes. This should allow sufficient time for interested parties to make relevant points. The Chairman of the committee will ask you to come to a conclusion if you take too long.
Thank you, Paula. I realise you're a minute or two late, Councillor Maitland. Do you have any declarations of interest?
My apologies, Chairman, for being late. Yes, I do have a declaration of interest in the last item on your agenda. That is the marital home.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Maitland. Come to item 4 on the agenda. Change of use of land for camping and caravan site. 12 pitches, including formation of 4 hard-standing static caravan pitches, and siting of facilities block, toilet, kitchen and showers. Siting of manager's accommodation unit, temporary. Formation of new vehicular access onto C27. An upgrade formation of hardcore access roads and car parking. And installation of shared septic tank and soakaways at Barend Wood, Sandyhills. Members are in session for this one. Paula, would you just remind us of what members are able to determine this application, please?
Yes, Chair. Chair, Councillors Blake, Carruthers, Diggle, Drybrough, Geddes, Maitland, Macomb, McCutcheon, McKee, Ogilvie, Thompson and Witts are all eligible to vote on this matter.
Chairman, I'll just leave for the duration of this one and the next one because I wasn't on the site visits, so I can go and get some work done elsewhere. Probably see in a couple of hours when you're finished.
Thank you. Just forgot I hadn't switched my telephone off. If members can remember to switch their phones off, that would be helpful as well. Apologies for that. Okay, so, Councillor Geddes.
Point of clarification, sir. Councillor McCaffrey gave as his reason for leaving the fact that he had not been in the relevant site visit. That, I would be grateful for confirmation. That is not an impediment to anyone who is otherwise entitled to determine the application, I'm correct in saying.
I would absolutely agree. Unfortunately, I was ill and unable to attend, but I feel I have enough information to make a determination. However, it's always down to members to use their own personal judgment on whether or no they feel they are able to determine the application. Councillor Geddes?
Don't dispute that, sir. I was merely raising the point for my own benefit, having not been on the relevant site visit in relation to item number 4. Thank you.
You're absolutely right, and I'll just ask Paula to clarify that situation, please.
No, members are eligible if they were here to hear the initial presentation and representations.
Grateful to your question, Councillor Geddes. Any other members have any questions? In that case, we come to the recommendation. Councillor McKay?
Sorry, Chair, I was waiting on you allowing us to speak. Sorry, I didn't pick you up right there. The only concern is on 4.8 access, top just above the servicing paragraph. It's regarding passing places. I know it mentions upgrading the road a wee bit where it needs tidied up and whatnot. And it's not considered this is a matter that should be required and agreed by condition. Particular has not been suggested as being necessary by a council roads officer, and it pertains to what is a private track. But if we are given planning permission, should we not have a condition on it that ensures that there are passing places put onto that or built into that road?
I would presume we could put that condition, but Robert, would you like to respond to that, please?
Chair, it's within the gift of members, obviously, if they want to add additional conditions, if you feel that's necessary and reasonable and it's something you would like to see, then for something like that I would suggest that you could amend recommended condition 8 on page 19 to include a point D and details of passing places along the access route from the C27 public road. So that would require those details to be submitted and then agreed, and you would then have certainty that there would be actual provision made.
Yeah,
Councillor McKay?
I certainly think it would be important, Chair, to put 2 or 3 passing places in that where necessary, obviously.
If we come to a position where we are inclined to approve the application, then maybe at that time you could put forward a proposal or an amendment to include that, if that's where we get to. Councillor Diggle?
Thank you, Chair. Having been on the site visit, I actually have a huge amount of sympathy with the objectors on this one. And I think there'll be a definite loss of amenity and privacy for the properties that are close to the track. In addition, there's an uphill section right next to property number 78, and he is certainly going to suffer a serious amount of noise pollution. Every car that comes up there is going to be revving and one thing or another. At night, the headlights will go straight into his sitting room, and in my opinion, the track is not fit for purpose for what it's hoping to do. So I would like to propose a motion to reject this application on the basis of light and noise pollution and the severe loss of amenity and privacy to the properties adjacent to the proposed track.
Thanks for that, Councillor Diggle. When we've finished the debate, I'll ask Paula just to ensure that complies and that it's a valid proposal. Councillor McComb?
No, sorry. The map does not accurately indicate the distance from the track to the corner of the property at number 78. Having walked up the hill there, the separation distance is only a matter of about 4 metres. It is very, very close to the property indeed.
Thanks for that. I presume that the map is an indication, and the fact that you've taken the opportunity to attend the site visit will give you much more information than otherwise I had, and I presume you're satisfied with that. Councillor Carruthers?
Thanks, Chairman. I wonder if there's as far as moving, just one point of clarity then in regards to mitigation measures when it comes to, when you come up to number 70, I was in the site visit, and I think the tape measure was laid out, it was about 7'3" or 7'8", something like that, so it was really close proximity from the boundary, the road boundary, to the house itself. So in regards to that, I think, is there any mitigation could have been put in place? Could we condition it that way to put up an acoustic and a screen for lighting and such like? Is that something would be open to as a proposal if we were to go forward? But obviously we haven't got the detail of that in front of us, but I do, when you're there, you're on site, you could put it into context, just the close proximity, and I think it was, I forget how many vehicle passes a year would potentially be there. Was it 600 visitors a year, which would accumulate to, I would imagine, 1,800, 2,000 vehicle passes at least a year. So it is quite a large amount. That's an assumption I'm making there, the amount of visitors, but kind of it's a fair amount of traffic when it's as close to that. It's just a few feet away from the house itself.
I'll ask Robert to answer your question. I presume we could insist on a fence being put up or some other measures that would help to mitigate. Robert, would you like to respond to that inquiry?
Yes, again, it's within the gift of members, when you're making your decision, if you wanted to grant permission subject to a condition like that, that would be useful. I mean, to be helpful, if it was something in particular you had in mind, like, for example, to address a noise issue or address a light pollution issue or something of that nature, the more detailed the condition would be in terms of what was sought, the more useful it would be. So, for example, if it's a solid screen fence that you would be looking for, you could certainly put on a suspensive condition asking for details of that to be submitted and agreed post-decision.
Thanks for that, Robert. Any other members? In that case, we currently have a proposal from Councillor Diggle to refuse the application. Did you get a note of the statement?
I have noted this as Councillor Diggle is proposing to refuse the application on the basis of the light and noise pollution caused to the properties adjacent to the track, and that allowing the development would result in an unacceptable loss of amenity and privacy for those properties. Is that correct?
Okay, does Councillor Diggle have a seconder for that motion? Councillor Carruthers?
The right question, but I would like to maybe got a wee bit more feel of what the actual committee's thinking, just in regards to the passing places and the actual screening and noise abatement that potentially could be used. It might be easier just to actually refuse it and let them come back if there's still a free go, and they would see exactly what was being proposed at that point.
I've got Councillor Driver and Councillor Thompson, but it would appear that Councillor McKee has suggested a compromise, but that's not for me to put words into his mouth. Councillor Driver, then Councillor Thompson.
Thanks, Chair. I think the issue for me was that particular point was the closeness of the road to number 78. The rest of the application is fine, and I think if we can find some mitigation of that particular, and whether it be a fence that stops the light actually going into the house, and I would have no problem with the recommendations, but it's getting that wording on that particular condition, and I think if officers was to go and talk to the applicant and see what can be done to mitigate that and put that in the condition, I would be very much for going with the condition that's in place, plus that a little bit extra.
Thanks for that. I'm sure we can delegate authority if we can give officers some indication of what it is we're actually looking for. Councillor Thompson?
Thank you, Chair. On attending the site visit, I share just what Councillor Driver has alluded to there, just that if there's some mitigation against the noise and light effect on amenity on resident number 78, that would be, I think, sort of suitable to allow some kind of progress with this. I gather, though, from the site visit that there was the spirit of the development was a kind of eco-friendly in nature and a sort of minimal impact. So I understand there've been some planting, use of willows as a form of screening, and I'm just wondering if we specify a fence, that might not be in keeping with the nature of the development as a whole.
Happy to accept that, and it may be that we just delegate to officers what it is you actually want to achieve. Of Councillor Maitland and then Councillor Geddes.
Well, I absolutely concur with members' concerns about the track. I don't think anybody is against the principle. I think the principle is rather good, and the idea about what is being proposed there is I think actually unanimously agreed. I don't get any sense that people don't want it to happen, but looking at that all the conditions have to be necessary, enforceable, precise and reasonable, I think it's quite difficult for us to do that here and really definitely get what we want to get, because I think it might be cleaner to refuse it, but it's completely obvious that the committee is minded to let it go forward if some arrangement can be come to. But I actually, for one, would quite like to see what's being proposed, and to find out whether that's actually going to be acceptable. Because there have been talk about willows. Well, frankly, that wouldn't cut it for me. So I suspect probably that I will be minded, having heard what people have to say, to refuse this at this point. But with a clear indication that if it can be made acceptable through mitigating fence, or indeed a change of the actual positioning of the track, because there is a problem, no doubt about it, with the slope of that track and vehicles revving so close to a property, then that's the way I think I would go.
Okay, what I wouldn't want with this committee to start to design something for the applicant, that would never do. And that's why I suggested maybe delegating to officers who have expertise in that field might be the way forward. Before I ask Councillor Geddes to come in, we've had a note, the members of the public are having great difficulty hearing what members are saying. So if we could kindly just bring our microphones forward a wee bit, please, or alternatively speak up so that members of the public can hear what's being said. Councillor Geddes, then Councillor Carruthers.
For the record, Chair, let me say it's on occasions it's not only members of the public. I'll leave it at that. The point I would make, sir, is that I was one of those. I didn't get to the site visit, for which I would apologise. I was one of those that had concerns about the legitimacy of with the representatives, certainly the representatives' views, and I think we've mentioned, the gentleman in question. And my view is that, while I would accept, if we can get a legitimate compromise, let's endeavour to seek it. But if we can't get a compromise, I would suggest, albeit with a degree of regret, that I would be of the view that the application should in fact be refused on the basis of the grounds that Peter has outlined. I think they're stateable, and I think they're reasonable grounds in the circumstances. But if we could get some form of compromise which would mitigate that sufficiently, I personally would like to see us endeavour to do so. Thank you, Chairman.
Thanks, Councillor Geddes. Councillor Carruthers.
Thanks, Chairman. I feel similar to what Alistair's just said there. In regards, my concerns is I think it should be at least 2 metre high. The fence, it should be solid. It should be some kind of acoustic design in there as well. There should be passing places. And at number 78 was the first dwelling. When you left the public road, was the first dwelling you came to. But as you went on, as you went past the last dwelling, you were actually overlooking as well. So there was an issue there. You had looking down into the property every time you went past. So it wasn't just the one. So that's where I'd have a difficulty in regards to taking it forward today. I think we should come back, as Councillor Maitland said, we should come back, see the further detail. But I think, I'm not against the principle of this at all, but so long as the proper design and measures are put in place in regards to the access and protecting not only the applicants, but protecting the actual the people who are living there at the moment. So, I'd be okay to second the amendment, the motion, sorry, in regards to Peter's put forward a motion to refuse it. But obviously I made it quite clear what I think. A better fencing, 2 metre high, you're passing places, and it wouldn't just be 78 as been mentioned, it's further on. You've got one at the end where there's overlooking issues as well. I think that's too much detail to try and tie down today. So we need to see that coming back. Not against the principle of it at all, be absolutely clear. And that's no predetermination of a further application yet either. But happy to second the motion in regards to Peter Diggles.
Okay, well, if we can bring this to a conclusion somehow, it would appear that there's a great deal of sympathy with the application and the principle of the application. It's how we ensure we protect the properties that are allegedly being affected by this proposal. So is it the general consensus of members that we refuse this today and invite a renewed application with detail on the mitigation measures that would protect these properties, or are we looking to approve this today and delegate to officers how that's done? Councillor McKee.
How would a deferral for a month suit, or would it no suit? We better going down the road of refusal.
I think the difficulty will be you put pressure on staff and the applicant to come back in a month, and probably it would be a fortnight because papers are produced a fortnight in advance. So certainly deferral would be an option, but maybe no to come back within 4 weeks. Councillor Driver and Councillor Geddes.
Yeah, I think the clearest option is just to refuse, and the applicant has got a year to come back, and you know, I think it's called a free shot. We usually call it a free shot in that particular area. So I would go along with the refusal, but again, understanding that the committee is quite clear, and the aspiration of the applicant is quite high on our agenda.
Councillor Geddes.
You intrigue me, if I can put it that way, Chair, with a suggestion, in fact, that we remit to officials, as it were, you know, to work out, you know, the sort of the details of the mitigating condition or conditions, without sounding impertinent in the slightest. Are we quite convinced, quite sure that that would be a legitimate form of determination today, sir?
Thanks for that, Councillor Geddes. Councillor Diggle, do you want to come back?
I don't think it's up to this committee to design a solution to the problem that we can all foresee, and so I'd just like to leave my motion standing on the table, please.
Okay, Councillor Geddes.
My question, sir, was process motivated. I'm really asking, is that an appropriate process on which this committee could base a decision? And it's a genuine inquiry. Let me make it clear, sir, on my part.
I think often in the past we have set out indications of what we would like to achieve and have left the detail to officers, because we don't want to get into a situation where we're arguing about whether the fence is made of teak or bamboo or whatever. If it is a fence, there should be a mechanism whereby the applicant officers could sit down together and come up with a solution that satisfies the council and hopefully would satisfy the objectors. But if members are happier to refuse it and see the detail themselves at some time in the future, I'd be comfortable with that. Is that the view of members? There is no alternative proposal at this time. In that case, it's simply the application is refused on the basis of the terms set out by Councillor Diggle.
The committee has determined to refuse the application on the basis of the noise and light pollution would be caused to adjacent dwellings by use of the proposed access track, resulting in an unacceptable loss of amenity and privacy for those properties.
Thank you, Paula, and would you be kind enough to put your microphone a bit closer as well, please? We want to hear this decision as well as the process. Okay, we come to item number 5. Installation of 4 replacement windows in north, south and west elevations at Darrachmore, Ailsa Crescent, Stranraer. Again, members are in session. Would Paula, I'll get you in a minute, Jim. Would Paula be kind enough to indicate which members can determine this application, please?
Yes. Chair, Councillor Carruthers, Diggle, Dryborough, Geddes, Maitland, McCutcheon, McKee, Ogilvie, Thompson and Witts are all eligible to vote on this matter.
Councillor McComb.
That's my point, Chair. I did not participate in the original discussion in this item and therefore will withdraw for this item.
Thank you. Councillor Dryborough.
Thanks, Chair. Are we in session now?
Yes.
Okay, thank you, Chair. I think the site visit was actually pretty useful for me in looking at the house itself. There's a lot of mishmash that was actually going on in the front and the back. I think talking to the applicant and other people there, it had been demonstrated that the industry specialist, that existing windows are actually beyond repair, and I actually think they could cause a health issue inside to some of the younger parts of the family as well. I think the overall integrity of the listed building is being actually detrimentally affected with the existing windows. It was pretty obvious that they couldn't replace like for like because of the standards that we have in British industry at the moment with regard manufacturing of replica windows. I think finally, probably most importantly, is that the windows intended to be used as replacement should try and match as near as possible to those that have actually in place. And funnily enough, at the start of the walk, we were in Portpatrick, and one of the windows up on the houses on the hill had UPVC windows, which looked exactly like what the replacement would actually be. So I think with all of that in mind, I think the application, I think we should grant, albeit contrary to some policies, such as the Structure Plan Policy E9, Wigton Local Plan Policy 51, and the guidance set out, Supplementary Planning Guides number 2 in Scottish Historic Environmental Policy. I think this application should go forward and be granted with the conditions set out through a discussion with the officer and the applicant.
Okay. Do members want to have a look again at the property and the windows just to see what exactly is we're discussing? Would that help? Okay, would you mind doing that, David, please, or Robert?
Thank you, Chair. I'll just run through the slide presentation. The application site, you can see it shaded there. It's a detached house with an outbuilding located within an established residential area within Stranraer. The building itself dates back to, I think, the mid-1950s, but it's in the report. Looking at the existing and proposed elevations, you're looking at the windows on the gables of the building. So the upper window on the left-hand side and the two windows, one above the other, on the middle slide. And those are the windows, the three windows that would be replaced to those elevations. On the right-hand side, you've got the furthest window on the right-hand side of that view, which is proposed for replacement as well. So those are the four windows affected. Looking at the south elevation, again, it's the window you see actually on the gable there. Opposite northern gable, two windows, one above the other. And the east elevation, it's the window on the right-hand side at ground floor level. That's the proposed window section that's been put forward. It's obviously a UPVC window. What you have at the moment are single pane metal frame windows original to the building. Looking at the photographs, again, you're looking at the west elevation in this view, and that's the gable elevation showing the two windows, one above the other, proposed for replacement. That is the window proposed for replacement on the rear elevation. That's a closer view of that window. We've then got the northern elevation windows. As you can see, they're metal frame single pane windows. On the southern elevation, you've got one at the upper floor level there. Again, single pane metal frame window original to the building. You can also see and view the flat roofed extension, which is UPVC windows, prominent on the right hand side. This is something, when you look at the listing in the report, the description of it, it's clear that this was in situ at the time this building was listed. And then you've got, showing it in its wider context, you've got the rear extension. Members may also wish to note the UPVC windows above that extension on that gable, and they were granted listed building consent fairly recently. The background to planning history is in the report in section 1.
Thanks for that, Robert. Councillor Geddes.
Oh, can I say so that I agree essentially with Councillor Driver. I called this application in, and I made it abundantly clear at the time of the calling of it in that I was not taking up a position as to whether or not the application should be granted or shouldn't be granted. I found that the site visit to be particularly helpful and relevant. Indeed, without causing Mr Duncan any embarrassment, he's already alluded to the window which was replaced, or consent was given comparatively recently, and my question to him at the time was, well, which member of staff did that? Because I would like to commend them for their common sense and their pragmatic view. And I was probably more embarrassed than he was when he said, well, I did. So I think that the correct decision was taken at that time. I think, this is a logical, it's a consistent follow-on, as I say, and if Councillor Driver is making the motion, which I understood him to do so, I will have no compunctions whatsoever in seconding that.
Thanks for that, Councillor Geddes. I've got Councillor Carruthers, Councillor Diggle, and then Councillor Maitland.
Thanks, Chairman. I would just like to support the motion that's been put forward as well. I think when you look at it in context, the rear of the actual dwelling itself, you've got the two gables in the rear. is very much a like for like what's there. Again, it's comparable when you look at the PVC against the steel that's here. We're still retaining the fabric of the front. You look at the front of the building, which is, I would say, the most part of the building that actually needs protected when it comes to its listed side. So I'm happy to support the motion in regards to granting the permission for the 4 windows. I think it's the proper and common sense approach.
Thanks for that, Councillor Crothers. Councillor Diggle?
Thank you, Chair. Just to say that I'm rather surprised that it's listed in the first place, but we can't do anything about that. But I understand it's Class C, which is the lowest form of listing. There are 4 windows under consideration. The one to the rear I have no problem at all because a precedent has already been set by the 3 existing UPVC windows on that elevation. I suggest that we should allow the other 3 on the basis of cost, security and insulation properties, as long as all 4 windows were in the same style as the already granted 3 windows on the rear elevation.
Thanks for that, Councillor Diggle. Councillor Maitland?
Well, sadly, I really cannot agree with you all. You don't have a plethora of buildings in Stranraer or in the west of the area that are of this type. This is actually quite an unusual building that maintains and retains that particular type of window. The windows are not going to be, they're not going to replicate the originals. That much is absolutely clear, crystal clear. You're going against, we would be going against our own structure plans, which state we should resist development proposals which destroy or adversely affect the character and appearance of a listed building. And this is an example of a post-war rather stylish villa. And I think members actually probably don't completely realise that if they put in the flat profiles and the very white profiles that you get coloured in of UPVC windows, you will change that building from what it's listed for. And forgive me, members, you might not understand why it's listed, but that doesn't mean that it's wrong to list it. And I quite clearly, for the sake of people in the area who actually rely upon us to protect their heritage and their culture, because that's what these buildings are, and if you simply allow them to be swept away, there'll be no reason to list that. So I am absolutely clear that I will go with the recommendations, and I move that.
Thank you, Councillor Maitland. Are there any other speakers? Does Councillor Maitland have a seconder to support the officer's recommendation? In that case, can Paula, you rehearse what the proposal is, please?
Yes, Councillor Dryborough, seconded by Councillor Geddes, moved to grant the application subject to conditions. Councillor Dryborough, I believe you indicated you felt the condition requiring the windows to be near as much as possible to the original would be appropriate. Can I suggest, given the level of detail in the drawings, we maybe ask the planning officer to comment on the level of detail already provided and how much more would be required?
Robert or David? Well, apparently, this is the style and application that they have submitted, so that can be changed. If you approve that today, it'll be the style that has been submitted to officers.
My understanding, sir, is that what they're now proposing is essentially, the same type of window as was granted consent a couple of years ago. That's exactly the situation.
Councillor Crothers?
Just to say that question was asked on the day of the site visit, and that's the answer what we got. It's as near as like for the windows that are already existing.
David?
If Robert can just take us back a couple of slides, then yes, well, that one. What you're seeing in the apex of the first floor and the rear elevation, that's basically akin to what you're going to get on all the other ones. Just going back to what Councillor Dryborough had said initially, it would be of assistance to officers if you would actually note that you were making an exception to policy on the individual merits this case. And I think you can probably make a case that the building to some degree was compromised when it was listed with UPVC windows, so that it's not opening the door for anybody to go and do the same thing to a building with original timber windows, for example.
That's helpful, David. Are you happy to place that on record as well? Councillor Carruthers?
And I suppose just the one thing I did pick up on earlier, I mean, the majority of the windows on the rear elevation are PVC windows. So we're just, it's keeping very much in keeping with what's already there. So I mean, that's a point I made earlier. Maybe it wasn't very clear in that, but that's why I'm looking at that there. The bulk of them windows are there. I can see one that is steel framed. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 12. But when you're looking at there, 12 are PVC and one's, so it's out of character to actually retain the steel.
I think what we're trying to make sure is that we don't leave an open door for the same application to come again, and again. This is an exception to policy because of previous circumstances and before the building was listed, and I think members have agreed that they're satisfied to leave it at that. In every case should be judged on its merit anyway. We shouldn't be allowing an opportunity to exist where people can come along and say, you did that, therefore we have the same right. This one's been determined on a specific circumstance, and that's recorded. Councillor Maitland?
I think I have not had the benefit of a seconder for my motion. Could I have my dissent recorded, please?
That would be fine. Thank you. Okay, Paula, can you confirm a decision, please?
The committee has determined to grant the application as an exception to policy in the particular circumstances in this case.
Thank you. Somebody want to call Councillor McComb back? Point Councillor McCaughtrey as well, aye. Thanks, folks. We come to item number 6 on the agenda, erection of swimming pool, building and siting of associated plant and machinery for a temporary period of 20 months at Dumfries Ice Bowl, King Street, Dumfries. The application is for full planning permission. The applicant is the Dumfries and Galloway Council. Recommendation approved subject to conditions, and Andrew Robinson isn't available today, so David Sutty will take us through the presentation. Thanks, David.
Thank you, Chair. As most members will be aware, DG1 is the leisure centre just across the road in Dumfries, and that is going to be closing for a period of approximately 17 months to allow the wet side, as it's called, the pool, to be repaired. The Policy and Resources Committee decided in March, rather than having no pool in Dumfries during that time, to go for a temporary pool. Now, this particular proposal is for a 10 metre by 25 metre pool, a 4-lane pool, which would be on site for about 20 months. It would be located within the car park of an existing leisure facility, namely the Dumfries Ice Bowl. So you can see on the screen there where it would be sited. It's just to the southeast corner of the Ice Bowl on the lower third of the car park for that facility. Going into this in a bit more detail, you can see that in the context it's just next door to Palmerston Park, the Queen of the South football ground, and indeed the former Tesco building just to the left of that, to the west of that, which is now an indoor football arena. The site fronts onto King Street. And zooming in a bit closer, you can see the nearest property to it of residential nature is one called Meadowbank Cottage on the opposite side of King Street. And this photo is flipped around 90 degrees from the last one to the left. So the top is the west side. You can see that the majority of the car parking area would be retained, which is the northern 2/3 would be around about 81 spaces I could count be retained in that area. 46 spaces would be lost on a temporary basis to site the pool. Zooming in further, that lets you see the location of it. The entrance to it would be on the west elevation. You'd have internal changing facilities within that, but the ticketing arrangements would actually take place within the ice bowl building. Plant for the temporary pool would actually be located on the east side, fronting on to King Street. It would be a pitched roof building in double-skinned UPVC, and the containers themselves for the plant are obviously fairly utilitarian. There are two main issues with this application. One is related to noise, which may come from the container units. You'll note in the report that environmental health officers are wishing to see further details to be 100% satisfied that it would be suitably insulated, and conditions 2 and 3, which are recommended, would actually address that aspect. The other big issue is to do with parking, because obviously you've got the potential double effect of losing the 46 spaces within the car park and also increasing the demand. The swimming pool would take a maximum of 80 people in the pool. So obviously at early stages, pre-application, we flagged this up as an issue, and as a result a traffic management plan has been produced. And the applicant section have got agreement with the Queen of the South to use their overspill car park, which you can see in the top left-hand corner there. That is some 260 metres away in the old Tesco site. The link between the two would require some upgrading, and condition 4 is really just requiring the implementation of all the issues which are in the traffic management plan. Just looking at the photos of it, you can just about see there's some bollards at the end of that, marks the end of the application site. Beyond that is the road, and then there's another car park on the opposite side lying beyond. So the temporary pool would be filling the centre of that slide there. Just looking from King Street towards the site. Certainly on the day the photos were taken, you can see that particular section of the car park wasn't totally full, and that's backed up by surveys done by the applicant section as well to show that the existing provision is more than generous for what's required on most occasions. That's looking from King Street again. These are the bollards that I mentioned, so that would be the end gable you'd be seeing. Looking along King Street towards the existing access, that would remain unaltered. You can see, sorry, just going back slide, you can see opposite there's a commercial use there for gas canisters, and then panning from that you've got the nearest residential property at Meadowbank Cottage. And then this is looking in the old Tesco car park, which would be used as an overspill, and would that path that runs through would then link round the side to what's being proposed. So subject to the conditions in the report, it's recommended for approval. We do have Keith Brown here from Roads section today if there are any queries about the roads aspect as well.
Thanks, David. Any questions for officers? Councillor Hislop?
Could you tell us when the photographs were taken? I was there at about 4 o'clock, 4:30 last night, and there was hardly a place to park.
I can't, unfortunately, because they were taken by the case officer, so it would have been during the daytime, clearly, but beyond that I don't know, I'm afraid.
Councillor?
Yeah, I have quite one or two problems with this application, because it seems to me that we're putting something in a place that it's not really suitable. You know, there's mention about the new car parking that will be made available. Well, the words that are used in the report are it's a remote nature, its distance is for an overspill, it's quite a distance for an overspill car park. By that, I would suggest that people in November, December, January will not want to park in the overspill and walk to the facilities. So there is going to be quite a problem created, and there's no yellow lines there at the moment, I understand, for parking in and around the residential areas there. And it's mentioned that, additional measures can be implemented if appropriate. Well, we all know that those things take ages to happen. They don't just happen overnight. And I just wonder why the roads, and perhaps Keith could say, are not prepared to put in some temporary measures now before people start parking on the pavements, blocking people's drives. Because people won't walk if it's raining and it's dark. They won't do it. And you've got, we're just setting up the ice bowl to be a really good facility to be used by lots of people, have competitions, bring kids in, buses, the lot. We also want people to continue swimming, and we're taking away 46 spaces for car parking. And the car parking that we're creating is not user-friendly. It's there, I quite understand it's there, and it's available, but only available when Queen of the South are not playing, of course. So it's not always available, and you're shutting the facilities when that happens. So I just wonder about the whole viability of the thing, if I'm being honest. And I don't think this is the committee to discuss that, because I think it's already been done at Policy and Resources, but I do have huge concerns about the parking. I really do. I think we're setting something up to fail. I just wondered if we could have some advice.
I'll get the roads officer to come and respond, but I think the traffic management plan is part of the issue, and I think the other thing is, if folks park in the drive, the traffic management plan will never stop that, or if they obstruct the drive, that's then a policing matter, which falls into a different category, but perhaps you'd like to reply, please.
Thank you, Chair. In answer to Councillor Gilroy's questions here, you do make some valid points, and we did give careful consideration prior to doing our report. Clearly the proposal does hinge on the success of the traffic and the traffic management. And yes, I think we do have concerns that there will be, on occasions, parking in the vicinity of the proposal. We did consider double yellow lines, but on consultation with the police, they weren't in favour, so that was in our report to the planners. So we have to consider other options. Depending on the magnitude of or scale of the parking adjacent to the proposal, it could well be that we have to reconsider the yellow lines if it is a problem to actually improve the overall situation here. So I don't know if that helps.
You want to come back, Councillor Gilroy?
Well, if you want to put double yellow lines in, do you not have to do all sorts of consultation? And it doesn't just happen, I don't imagine. Like, oh, well, we've had a problem this week with everybody parking higgledy-piggledy wherever they like. We're going to put double yellow lines in next week, because I don't think you can do that. I wouldn't suggest, but you'll be able to tell me.
No, you're absolutely correct again. There is it's a statutory process, and could get objections from residents or anybody else that might have an issue with double yellow lines going down. So it's not sacrosanct that it could actually be put in place if based on objections. So there is a lead time for that, for sure. But as I say, we did consider it, and we've tended to resist it because we didn't get approval from the police, or they weren't on for that.
I would presume if it came to light that there was a specific time window, such as Queen of the South playing every second Saturday, the police could put no parking cones in the vicinity for a period of time that would help to deal with the traffic flow or the traffic issues. But that again would be something that need to be done in conjunction with Roads Department and the Council. Of Councillor Carruthers and then Councillor McCaughey.
Thanks, Chairman. I thought just me would have these views, but I do think it's a square peg going at a round hole. I really do. This is a site that's available to the council quite freely, and that's the reason we're using it. There must be better sites, I would say, in that area or within the vicinity of DG1 that would be better suited. Even I've seen on a normal day going in there, you do have constraints. I think we've got no option but to either refuse it or go for a site visit and actually see what it would look like, whether it was yellow lines or just to understand the constraints. Unfortunately, I didn't get round and have a look. I would like to see when it is busy, when it is quiet, to see what it does look like. Because if we were taking 46 parking spaces away, then adding further parking, additional parking load on top of that, we didn't want to be making a rod for our own back as a council planning authority. We want to be taking this seriously, and if there's better options there, but at least if we do make the decision to approve it, then we've considered all the facts. So either defer or refuse, I would propose, Chair.
Thanks for that. Councillor McCaughey, Councillor Haslip and Councillor Thompson.
I think you've got to remember, we've looked at all the options. That was one of the things that the Policy and Resources Committee did, looked at the options, and that was the option they came up with, and obviously that's why it's at the Planning Committee. So you either give it permission or you don't. There are no other options. If you refuse it, it's not going anywhere else. We've looked at all the options. I don't see a problem. I think if you go and take a look in the car park at the swimming pool area now, Monday to Friday, majority of cars parked in that car park at DG1 are usually councillors who are in here at a meeting, members of the public who park there. There are not many folk who are parking in that car park who are users. I would say to Ivor, the reason that the car park at the Ice Bowl was so busy yesterday, this is the start of the seniors ice curling tournament, so we had a lot of people, a lot of organisers were there yesterday. You pass that car park at the Ice Bowl most days of the week, it's lying there empty. In fact, the fullest I've ever seen it is usually in Queen of the South that are at home, because it ends up being an overspill car park for Queen of the South sometimes if they're playing a big game. And as for the Queen of the South car park, it's actually closer to the Ice Bowl than the Brooms Road car park is to DG1. And people quite often, if there's a big event at DG1, they'll park their car in the Brooms Road car park of an evening and cut through McClellan Street and Brook Street to get to DG1. And it's a 2-minute walk for the Queen of the South car park to the Ice Bowl there, so I didn't see a problem. But really, you know, there are no other options. If you grant it, that's fine. If you refuse it, there won't be a swimming pool in Dumfries for the duration of the 20 months that the DG1 is closed down.
Before we go any further, we're still in questions for officers here. Councillor Hislop.
Chair, it was a question for the officer regarding the fact that, you know, yesterday, yes, may have been an exception, but as someone who goes Monday, Wednesday, Friday with his son to the curling, and there is a lot of people parked there, you've got skating on after school, you will then be loading on to that the fact that from 5 o'clock onwards, well, after school, 4 o'clock onwards, you have swimming club, you have swimming lessons. The car park next door is then usually emptied of the people who are using it, and the parents are still struggling to find spaces to park when you sit and listen to them in the car park. You've got that to add on. You've already heard the officers say that the police don't want yellow lines. Why? Because they're not going to police parking on the streets, because they've told us that. Our officers can't do it because it's not been decriminalised. How are we going to protect the residents of that area, where every house along the front of every street close by will have a car parked in front of it when they come home from the work at 5 o'clock, which is the heaviest load we're going to put on here? We don't have car parking spaces.
So is that the question for the officer?
What was taken into account? What, you know, was it the 9 to 4 when there's no kids using it, no families using it because they're in school, or was it the peak times of every facility that's currently being used?
Keith.
Thank you, Chair. My colleagues in this deal assessed this on peak times, and as I've mentioned before, the whole proposal does hinge on how effective the traffic management is on this application. It could be satisfactory. I think we appreciate that there's going to be a strong likelihood that there will be parking adjacent to the proposal, and it's how best we deal with that. That is a difficult one, based on the fact that the police have already intimated that they're not going to support double yellow lines. How then we push that forward, again, I feel, assuming that there is an issue, will have to be done in conjunction with planning, the police and ourselves, and that is the difficult one. And right at this moment in time, you know, I'm not in a position to give a solution to that, because clearly the best solution is double yellow lines or some other form of waiting restrictions in place here to mitigate any parking issues that are likely to happen. I'm sorry, I can't really add any more to that at this moment in time.
So I suppose we're always advised we don't put in conditions we can't enforce. The traffic management plan will then be much use if we can't enforce it. Councillor Stephen Thompson.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, touching on parking again, I notice with, just for example, DG1 has toddlers and parents, parking spaces and disabled parking spaces. which I think most road users and parkers would respect, that they're kept free for those appropriate users. So given that the intention is to take a lot of the south space, obviously that's not something we could realistically do there. So would that require the number of places that we provide for DG1 users and sort of vulnerable elderly age groups or disabled, etc.? Would that be part of the factor in for the traffic management and parking?
Keith?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I would say that the remaining car park has to facilitate the disabled and drop-offs for mother and toddlers, and I would certainly push for that to be included in the traffic management plan if, in fact, it's not already included. And I have to apologise, I was just diverted here this morning, so I've never been able to refresh myself to give a complete answer to that. But yes is the answer. That it should be included, and it should be close to the proposal.
Stephen?
Thanks for that. And just as a follow-up to that, it says that the path should be made good before the development takes place. That would be a condition as recommended by the management plan. Is that right? For the temporary access. And the other thing with that is that should we really wait for the details? And obviously you're at a disadvantage if you've not had a chance to get a final refresh before coming to this committee, but should we maybe wait for the details, maybe defer this until we do get the details before we go ahead?
That'll maybe be a rhetorical question, Stephen. We'll decide that when we come to committee, because Keith has been put in. It's Ken Drew that should be reporting today, and Ken isn't available, so Keith's helping out. But we'll come back to your point before we decide. Councillor McKee?
Do you want to get into session?
We've got to in due course, but it's questions for officers, and I'm happy to have you come to your question when we're in session. We're still in questions for officers.
It's no question. It's a bit of information based on what's in the papers on what's going on in that area at the present time.
Well, we'll bring that through when we come to session, Councillor McKee. I've got Councillor Maitland and Councillor McComb.
I suspect the officer might not be able to answer this question, but my question was whether or not the roads assessment included the possibility of another ice hockey championship, because if you remember rightly, this committee was asked to cut down the trees and put in porta cabins, which took away some parking. So I'd like to know whether or not the roads assessment actually takes that into account.
David might be able to answer that for you.
Yes, part of the traffic management plan, number 10, says events. During the duration of the temporary pool installation, there will be a limited number of special events hosted by either the ice bowl or the temporary pool. Any events that would be scheduled would be promoted and advertised 4 to 6 weeks in advance and would encourage all participants and spectators to use the overspill car park. That's what it says.
Happy with that, Councillor Maitland. Any other questions for officers? Councillor McComb.
Thanks, Chair. Keith, you mentioned the fact that the parking capacity had been based upon a maximum use situation. I assume that includes the possibility of a large home game at Palmerston.
Keith?
Part of the report we recommended that there would be a major event strategy drawn up, and it's my understanding that should not happen at this moment in time. I think if there's home games on and this facility has got to run in conjunction with that, I think that, personally speaking, that is the wrong thing to do, and I think that should be reflected in the major management strategy that has to be agreed. So I would say that should be avoided.
And David just shown us item 4 on the traffic management strategy. Do you want to just read it out, David, please?
Sure. It says restricted opening times. The temporary pool will close 1 hour before match kick-off times at the weekend to allow the traffic and pedestrian flows of those attending and the Queen of the South matches on match days. This philosophy also supports all matches that are associated with the Solway Sharks matches.
Thanks, David. Happy with that, Jim? Okay, thank you. Stephen?
Come back, Chair.
Sorry, Jim first, then Stephen.
Yeah, I'm happy with the condition with regard to home games at Palmerston. have you taken into account the users of the Queen of the South Arena, where you may have 30 to 40 people playing football there and 1 or 2 onlookers as well?
Yes, the capacity of the Queen of the South car park far exceeds use of the arena, as you mentioned, and I think there's still plenty scope to facilitate this proposal, even if that was ongoing.
Thanks, Jim. Stephen?
Thanks again, Chair. Just on 4.18, just to do with the traffic management. Obviously, you've alluded to double yellow lines. Police have advised that it wouldn't be the best option for them. And it mentions informal parking. Now, that's not the same as illegal parking, I guess, but I suppose if a vehicle's legally parked and taxed and all the rest of it, and it's just parked in a space, there's nothing really anybody can do about that, unfortunately, sometimes. So I'm just sort of wondering what the role of the community safety officers would actually be, as mentioned there, in terms of managing the parking. I think the idea is that if there's a lot of people parking nearby that would otherwise sort of inconvenience residents who would normally maybe park there, so they may not be parked illegally, so I'm just wondering how exactly that could be actually realistically enforced if they're not an obstruction.
Before Keith replies to that, anyone who pays road tax, pays insurance and buys fuel is entitled to park on the public highway unless there are indications somewhere suitably signed to say otherwise. So I would presume that our enforcement team will deal with illegally parked vehicles and vehicles obstructing driveways, etc. But legitimate parking is nothing that we can address because that's no part of our role and it's no part of the traffic management plan either. Keith, would you want to add to that?
Thank you, Chair. No, I agree with everything you've said there. Informal parking does actually cover parking on the road that the vehicles are taxed. Where it does become an issue, as the Chair has intimated, is where we have vehicles obstructing driveways, etc., etc. Then we don't have any legal jurisdiction to move them on. That is the police matter, and the community safety officers would have to have some dialogue, some fast-track dialogue set up with the police in situations like this to move them on.
Thanks for that, Keith. If there are no other questions for officers, you maybe just want to sit a wee while, Keith, but we'll go into session. So members are now in session. I think Councillor McKee, you wanted to make an observation.
Aye, thanks, Chair. There's been a lot of talk about double yellow lines and whatnot. I kind of wonder actually where they want double yellow lines to be. Is it all the streets round about that area or just in King Street itself? I've already had talks with Mr Allison regarding parking restrictions on King Street. The gas facility that's in there, suppliers of gas, they require 24-hour access, and their access is such that the gate sits back, so there's a good parking space there for a couple of cars, and they restrict, obviously, if they have an emergency, they supply the hospitals with oxygen, they need to get in there, they've got to get the police, get the car moved and whatever, where they shouldn't be there at all. If they're not wanting to put yellow lines down in King Street, and I reckon King Street's about the only bit you could logically put them, and certainly on the residential side. What about putting boxed area in, and I notice the access into the ice bowl is almost opposite the access into the gas suppliers. Why not put a yellow box in there? And the people that live in Meadowbank Cottage, they have difficulty. He's a business that works from home. It's quite a large van. He needs to reverse into his property. So that would give him space to reverse in. But I think somebody has mentioned the football when the likes of Rangers and Hearts come down, the bigger crowds. We need to look at how this is going to be managed, and there may be bigger games next season as well. So these all need to be managed. And people have mentioned one or two things going on at the Ice Bowl. You look at the programme of events that's been on in the Ice Bowl. The skating's never been mentioned, the synchronised skating, and that's the biggest attractor of crowds that they have at the Ice Bowl. Albeit you've got international curling, we've had international ice hockey twice this season, and I certainly wouldn't like to see them things turned down just because we've got the swimming pool on site and because of parking restrictions. We've got problems at a meeting with one of my constituents the other week there where he's disabled and people parking on pavements, he can't get by in his wheelchair, he's got to get onto the road. And all these sort of things, it's all right for the police to wipe their hands and say, oh no, we're not going to do that. They need to take responsibility for some of the things that's going on and help the likes of disabled people, people with prams and all that sort of thing, to ensure that parking is done properly. Environmental mental standards, I think it's very important that this is the noise that's going to be coming for this plant to keep the water warm and that sort of thing. We need to be sure that that noise level is such that the residents will not hear it. And I think that goes without saying. Although I've mentioned just the one cottage, we've got blocks of flats that's maybe another 20, 30 yards over the hedge for the cottage. So if it's got to be that noisy, they would be affected as well. So there's difficulties there without a doubt. And I hope that I'm sure they will be properly addressed. But the parking is going to be a big issue. You know, when people take their children to school, if they could drive into the classroom, they would. They're that lazy. And they've got to be moved on. And that's the bottom line. And identify where, tell them where they can properly park. But other than these issues, I think they're very important issues. Although it's only two properties I've been talking about, they're very important issues for these two properties, and I would hope that we can have a look at other ways of managing the traffic. If you're not willing to put down a yellow line, just on King Street, I'm not looking at the rest of Somerville or anything anywhere else, but just on King Street itself.
Thanks, Councillor McKee. If members are minded, of course, we can make a condition that double lines are put down or boxes are put in certain places. I think what we don't want to do is start and rewrite the traffic plan for officers because they've put a lot of work and effort into getting it to a position where they think it's right. I think the other thing is we've already been told in football matches the facility will close an hour beforehand, so there will only be a conflict for football matches, whether they're big matches or no. And of course, by doing double yellow lines, you then impact on the residents as well as anybody who comes into the area. So there is a sensitivity there, and we need to be very careful with that. But I'm happy I'm in members' hands. If you want specific locations protected, then that's fine. We can make that as a condition. But remember, we will not be policing it. I think that's the other issue. That's no staff's duty, no something we'd expect. It's how we deal with it. If we accept the traffic management plan and in due course needs to be amended or we need to deal with the police, then that's an ongoing issue, as is the noise, because the report quite clearly says there will be a level of noise and during daytime it will be absorbed into the everyday activity and it will be managed presumably to a level that will satisfy the immediate residents. And I think the comfort we've got is there aren't any objections, or there's nobody coming to speak to this. There are two objections from immediate neighbours, so it seems to be a very localised issue and hopefully something we can deal with. I've got Councillor Carruthers and then Councillor Dryborough and then Councillor Hislop. Sure thing.
I think the residents that I've spoken to are quite comfortable that it's going to be put in there and the noise abatement and all that will be taken into consideration. The parking is the big issue. Access into their own property is the big issue. And I would hope our colleague here from Roads will take it away and ask them to have another look at how it could be managed a wee bit better for the sake of the residents and for the sake of any emergency use that they want, gas and whatnot. And with regards to the use of the ice bowl starts about 6:30 in the morning. There's skating done then. There's kids go for school during school hours today, skating and curling. And there's obviously curling starts, well, it'll be stopping just the end of this month, I think. But it starts up in September again, and it's busy every afternoon and evening. So it's an excellent facility. It's well used. So we've got issues there. There's no two ways about it.
Thanks for that, Councillor McKee. And I think Keith did say that if we accept the proposal and if the traffic management plan is put in place, it can be amended if and when issues come to light, because this is their draft or the proposal that will be developed as the process or as the facility is used in the ongoing next 20 months if we agree. Councillor Carruthers.
Thanks, Chairman. I still feel very much so like I did earlier. I think we need to defer for a site visit so we can see exactly what we're looking at and go at an appropriate time. One thing I do know that is that a road officer hasn't got a magic wand. He can't just magic up a perfect solution for this. That's a fact. And it's got to be very difficult for us as members to make a proper decision here. But what I would like to do, if we've got to make a decision here, then it is got to be this site, that it's the right decision, it's fully informed, more to the point. So at least if we do get any repercussions, I can back up the decision that I've made. And I don't feel there's more questions than answers here today. I don't feel we've got enough information in front of us, but a site visit would certainly make a big difference from my perspective. So I would move that we do defer for a site visit, Chairman.
I'll come back to that when other members have the opportunity to speak, Councillor Carruthers, although you've heard from Councillor McCaughty saying that Policy Committee have said that's the only location, but I've got Councillor Hislop, I've got Councillor Dryborough, Hislop, Maitland and Gilroy. Point of order, Jane, okay.
Yes, please. Chairman, I thought actually if we're going to go on a site visit, we should deal with the site visit first, rather than let everybody chat and then decide we're going to try a site visit. So I wonder if we should take that first. I propose we don't go.
In your hands, do you want to determine now whether or not a site visit's an appropriate way forward? Councillor Geddes?
Procedurally, sir, now that the motion has been put, you're obliged to deal with it.
Okay, then in that case we will. We have a motion for a site visited, seconded by Councillor Maitland, I presume. No, we don't have a second.
Sorry, I understood Councillor Maitland to be proposing you don't attend a site visit.
Correct.
Sorry, I thought you were supporting what Councillor Carruthers was saying. In that case, Councillor Geddes is absolutely right. I'll need to deal with it. I misunderstood. So currently, we have a proposal for a site visit and a proposal not to have a site visit, and neither of them have seconders. So I've got... Okay, and Councillor Diggle? Councillor Carruthers, okay. In that case, Paula, will you put the question, please?
Okay. The motion proposed by Councillor Carruthers, seconded by Councillor Dizzle, is to defer consideration to allow a site visit. The amendment proposed by Councillor Maitland, seconded by Councillor McCaughty, is to continue to determine this application today. Chair.
Amen.
Councillor Dick. Councillor Carruthers. Councillor Diggle. Councillor Dryborough.
Amendment.
Councillor Geddes.
Amendment.
Councillor Gilroy. Councillor Hislop. Councillor Maitland.
Amendment.
Councillor McCaughty. Councillor McComb.
Motion.
Councillor McCutcheon.
Amendment.
Councillor McKee. Councillor Thompson.
Motion.
Councillor Witt's not present. That's 4 votes for the motion, 9 for the amendment. The committee has determined not to defer for a site visit.
So we will determine the application today. I now have Councillor Dryborough and then Councillor Hislop.
So thanks very much, Chair. I think we all know why we are actually here today with this application, because of what happened with DG1, and I'm sure that those in the Policy and Resources Committee actually discussed this quite considerably and came up with the suggestion that they've actually come forward with. It's the best, as far as I can see, of a bad situation, and there are going to be some road safety issues. There's no doubt about that. I'm saying road safety issues. It might be that, you know, some people who actually walk to a swimming pool might not mind the couple of 100-metre walk because it's all part of getting fit anyway. So the situation in front of us at the moment is that we have an application for a temporary building for 20 months until we get the DG1 situation sorted out. And we need to get that DG1 situation sorted out for the people of Dumfries and the surrounding areas to actually use that facility. So we've got to have a temporary swimming pool, because obviously the nearest ones are a bit further out of town and some of them are actually private, so they'll not be used by the public, the paying public. Situation for me, as far as I can say, that's quite straightforward, is we do require a facility like this in the area. policy resources have discussed and have come up with that situation, there are going to be some traffic management in place, and we can change that as and when we require to do that. So as far as I'm concerned, I think we need to go with the recommendation to approve it subject to conditions, because we need to make sure that when the DG1 repairs are actually going on, we are in a position to actually do those repairs, and we need something in place to do it.
Thank you, Councillor Driver. I presume you're not suggesting that because Policy and Resources decided that we should agree it, this is definitely our decision, and decision rests here. Councillor Hislop?
Chair, it was a point of clarity. Someone said that the facility would close an hour before the football matches. Is that the whole facility or just the swimming pool? Because my understanding was just the swimming pool. Therefore, you still have the problem of if you have an ice hockey match or speed skating or synchronised skating or curling on.
I'll ask David to respond, but I'm sure it's just the swimming pool because the rest of the facilities were there before anyway. But David, can you deal with that, please?
Thanks, Chair. Yes, that's correct. The wording here is the temporary pool will close an hour before match kick-off times. It does go on at the end to say this philosophy also supports all matches that are associated with the Solway Sharks matches. So that's maybe the confusion there.
Okay. Do we have any other members wishing to speak? In that case, we come to the... Stephen.
Thank you. Yeah, it was just a wee, sorry to get back to the parking and that, and it's just about management. You know, I think it's really just about managing, if this does go ahead, then how it gets managed effectively for the smooth running of the whole thing. I notice that it's leisure and sports staff are managing and monitoring the parking, I presume nearby the facility, and I was just wondering why they would be taking that on board in terms of their responsibilities, when you would think it'd be the community safety officers who are maybe more specialised in managing that kind of issue. So it was really just, in one sense, the traffic management plan is saying leisure and sports staff would be managing and monitoring the parking, and it'll be community safety officers will be managing the parking, but I don't really see, I've not really got an answer yet, because obviously we don't have the detail about that here today, in terms of how they'll be managing the parking, maybe slightly further away. But I also gather that the traffic management plan is at this time considered sufficient, so now we're beating about the bush talking about parking because it's actually referred to as sufficient in the report. So either it's sufficient and we just go ahead, or it's not sufficient and we need more detail. Not really. A bit of clarity in that would help.
I don't know whether David can do that or no, but I would imagine that leisure and sports staff would be the immediate vicinity, and out with that would be either community support team or the police. But David, can you help us, please?
What it actually says is the entrance to the existing Ice Bowl car park will be manned by leisure and support staff to further reinforce the new arrangements and provide additional support to customers. So I'm assuming that the leisure and support staff will really only be within the confines of the actual leisure facility, and it's community safety officers who will be looking in the streets surrounding it. That's certainly my interpretation of it. But just to answer the question as well about, this is what has been put before us, and roads officers and planning officers are comfortable with it. But it does clearly say in the last paragraph is, following the introduction of the mitigation measures above, officers will be required to review the effectiveness of the conditions as stated. Officers will need to further consider the introduction of additional alternative measures which may be, which will be constantly kept under review, so that there is that undertaking in the traffic management plan to keep constant review of this.
Stephen?
And just to finally put the other double yellow line to bed, 4.22 sort of indicates that both roads officers and the police are against that anyway, so it would never really be an option, I gather. Would that be right?
That's certainly the indication that we've heard, and again, you've heard from Keith today the same sort of thing. I don't think it would be competent to attach a planning condition to require double yellow lines anyway, for the simple reason that there's no guarantee that it could be implemented. There could be objections to it, could fall, in which case you've just snookered yourself with a condition which is effectively tantamount to a refusal. So I would certainly veer members away from attaching conditions about double yellow lines.
Thanks for that advice, David. Patsy?
Yeah, well, I think somebody said at the beginning of this that, we're putting in a sort of square, round peg in a square hole here. I think this just doesn't work. I think this is, we're jeopardising a really good facility we've got there in the ice bowl, which is going from strength to strength, and we're about to put something in place which is going to make that a really difficult, viable unit for nearly 2 years, which I think is a big mistake. We spent a lot of money on that building. And I would suggest that the traffic management scheme that's been put in, I think our officers have said that, yeah, it's there, but we can't enforce it. Anything that we find that's wrong is going to be difficult to bring back and to put things in place which make the traffic management any better. The police don't want to police it. They don't want the yellow lines. And so I would say I am going to propose that we refuse this, because I think that I'm doing it on the traffic thing, on recommendation 4, and I would suggest that the mitigating measures proposed in the submitted traffic management plan cannot be managed or enforced, so does not comply with the Nithsdale Local Plan GP 77, paragraph C.
Thanks for that, Councillor Gilroy. I've got, I think Councillor Carruthers wanted to second that first, but so I was going to come to speakers in their order. I've got Councillor McCaughey, then Councillor Carruthers, then Councillor Maitland.
Thanks, Chairman. I mean, I think in terms of managing the parking, that is always the responsibility of the staff at the facility. It doesn't matter whether we're putting a swimming pool there or not. That's part of their duties to ensure that that things comply with all the health and safety and all the risk management rules. I mean, let's get this into context. By putting the swimming pool there, you're losing 46 spaces. Right? It's not the end of the world. You're losing 46 spaces, which most of the time were never getting used anyway. You're talking most of the day, these spaces are not used. There has now been a facility made available to us. It was not available before, which is actually double the 46 spaces we're losing. So this nonsense about how it's going to ruin the ice bowl, load of tosh. What we could end up doing with the swimming pool being shut for 2 years is losing all the advantages we've built up in the swimming. So let's be realistic about this and try and serve the public of Dumfries instead of doing them down. And I would support the motion from Councillor Dryborough that we grant permission.
Councillor Carruthers?
I would come back. I would certainly second the motion by Patsy in the first place, or amendment, whatever it may be in regards to refusing this. I think we're doing a disservice to the public in that end of Dumfries if we do approve it. I think general policy 2 would be my main concerns, which is road safety. I think there will be road safety concerns as it goes forward. I really do, Chair. I suppose Patsy's summed it up fairly well. She took the most of what I was going to say in regards to that. But I do think this is a square peg going into a round hole. We shouldn't be approving this today. There must be better sites in that area, or further afield for that matter. This has got to create is a load of concern for local residents, and then it then comes back at the council.
Thanks for that, Councillor Carruthers. Councillor Maitland?
No, things have been said. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other members? Councillor McKee and Councillor Gilroy.
Aye, thanks, Chair. I think the local residents have shown their support by no objecting to this proposal. But I'm not going to object to either, but what I would hope is that roads take away and give further consideration to yellow lines on King Street and, if necessary, box junctions at the access into the ice bowl and into the gas suppliers and into the residents of Meadowbank Cottage, if they take that into consideration, give it further consideration. Because the last time I spoke to Mr. Allison, he had to have discussions with the police regarding the football for next season, and whether these discussions had already been held and the other discussions had still to go ahead or no, I don't know. But I'd ask you to give further consideration to yellow lines on King Street only, and if necessary box junctions in there.
Thanks for that, Councillor McKee. I had advice that we kind of place it in a condition. I think that's sound advice. It is an ongoing assessment, and I'm sure Keith and his team, Ken Drew or whoever, will ensure, and Keith will pass on your views to Ken Drew at the earliest opportunity to make sure he's aware of the concerns you've raised. Councillor Gilroy?
I just want to pick up on something Councillor McCaughey said, that yes, the swimming pool is probably primarily for people in and around Dumfries, but the ice bowl most definitely is not. That is a region-wide facility. We've, as a council, put a lot of money into that. And I think we need to keep that viable and vibrant and to work. And I think we're just making a mistake with that. So I just wanted to put that in.
Thanks for that, Councillor Wright. Okay then, I think if all members... Oh, Peter.
Sorry, I'm not sure whether I'm allowed to do this, but in the light of the way the discussion's going, could I propose a motion that we do in fact now have a site visit?
We decided we had a vote and we voted against it by 9 to 4, so can you revisit that? That decision was taken. We have to, we've decided it will be determined today. But thanks, Peter. So, Paula, will you put the question, please?
The motion proposed by Councillor Dryborough, seconded by Councillor McCottrey, is to approve subject to conditions as set out in the report. Amendment proposed by Councillor Gilroy, seconded by Councillor Carruthers, is refused on the basis that the traffic and parking mitigation proposed is insufficient, the proposed traffic management plan cannot be managed or enforced, and the proposal therefore does not comply with General Policy 7.
Councillor Gilroy, you happy with that?
2.
General Policy 2, aye.
My apologies, I've written down 7 for some reason. Chair.
Motion.
Councillor Carruthers.
Amendment.
Councillor Diggle.
Amendment.
Councillor Dryborough.
Motion.
Councillor Geddes.
Motion.
Councillor Gilroy. Councillor Hislop. Councillor Maitland.
Amendment.
Councillor McCottrey.
Motion.
Councillor McComb.
Amendment.
Councillor McCutcheon.
Amendment.
Councillor McKee.
Motion.
Councillor Thompson.
Amendment.
Councillor Witt's not here. 5-8. Yeah. That's 5 votes for the motion, 8 for the amendment. The committee has determined to refuse the application on the grounds set out.
Thanks, Keith. Thank you, members. Come to item 7, application for the extension to existing surface coal mine, Eastern Extension, without compliance with condition 28 of planning permission 10/P/30323, condition requiring coal to be transported by conveyor to allow transportation of coal by road at land to the east of Glenmucklock Surface Coal Mine, Laggery Road, Kirkconnell. The application is a full planning permission. The applicant's Hargreaves Surface Mining Limited. The recommendation is approved subject to successful completion of a legal agreement and conditions. Case officer is Patrick Hanna. Pat, will you take us through your presentation, please?
Thank you, Chair. First of all, a couple of updates and corrections to the report. At paragraph 2.3, the Council's Roads Officer's response in paragraph A should read, instead of Dumfries and Galloway Council intend that a stopping up order be promoted, that should read a delisting order. That also carries forward to paragraph 4.5 of the report, where again stopping up is referred to, and that should again refer to delisting. And next paragraph on at 4.6, the 5th line down, it says that it's recommended that the legal agreement be concluded within 3 months. That should be 6 months. To give a little bit of the background to surface coal mining in Upper Nithsdale, the plan shown here gives you a good indication of what's been happening over recent years. The dark blue is the settlement of Kirkconnell. The green area is Glenmucklock, and also the eastern extension, or the Lagray extension, which is to the northeast section of the green area. The red line is an application known as Rig North, which has permission, or is minded to approve. Permission hasn't yet been issued because Section 75 hasn't yet been concluded on it. The light blue area is Rig South, where there is a planning permission that is currently seeking renewal. and the yellow or orange area is a restored surface coal mine. So there's a fair bit of activity going on within this area next to Kirkconnell. Glenmuckloch itself is fully extracted. There's no more coal to be extracted from the main Glenmuckloch site, and that site is waiting final restoration and backfilling. The Legray extension to the northeast of the Glenmuckloch site, my understanding is that extraction on that has just very recently commenced, but that coal isn't being removed from the site as yet. The proposal is to transport the coal from the eastern extension by road along the route shown from Glenmuckloch down the Legray Road, crossing a small narrow bridge onto the A76 and then back along through New Cumnock and to the Garleffen site and to the Crowbands Gate railhead, where all coal from East Ayrshire is and from Glenmuckloch is transported. At the moment, the transport of coal at Glenmuckloch is taken via a conveyor belt that runs over the hills down to Garleffen. This is the site in more detail, showing the eastern extension or the Legray extension to the northeast, with the route shown in green dots. This is standing at the site entrance to Glenmuckloch, and you can see on the horizon the coal mine itself. Turning around and looking at the road leading away from the site. This is a typical section of the road and a passing place along the route. This is shortly before Legray Road, and the reference earlier to delisting would occur shortly after the last access for the properties in this area. This is the restricted road bridge over the railway line. And turning around, you can see that it's narrow width, but with wide splays. And moving over the bridge onto the A76. This is the view towards Kirkconnell and the view towards New Cumnock. The issue of transporting coal by road has been explored a number of times in the past, relating to the original permission for extraction of coal at Glenmuckloch, and that dates back to 1999, and that's proved insurmountable. However, and that's largely to do with Transport Scotland objecting to the use of this bridge to take coal wagons onto the A76 and the restricted width of it. There's fundamentally a concern with having two wagons meeting each other and causing backups on the Legray Road or the A76. The applicants have put forward a justification and a traffic management plan that in minute detail assesses how long it takes for a wagon to move from the site to the bridge, to Garleffen and back again. And the traffic management plan intends to have traffic that ensures that wagons do not meet each other at the bridge and also do not travel in convoy, so that there's no risk to the road, or there's reduced risk to the road. The applicant has stated that in a previous application that the annual maintenance costs for the conveyor belt are in the region of £2 million a year, and the applicant has built in the cost savings that would be achieved by this into the restoration scheme for the overall Glenmuckloch site in order to maximise the restoration levels at that site. In terms of the impact on the road, both Transport Scotland and the local roads service are content with the proposal and the traffic management plan, subject to review of the traffic management plan in 3 months' time to assess how well it's working, and also subject to a legal agreement to ensure that the remaining section of listed public road is properly maintained at the expense of the operator. The other significant issue relating to this application is the impact on communities. There has been an objection from East Ayrshire in respect of transport of coal through New Cumnock, and that objection relates to residential amenity and regeneration of New Cumnock that they're promoting at this time. However, given the existing noise levels on the A76, the predicted noise levels from the coal transportation is predicted to be within acceptable levels, and that is anticipated and defined as being slight or barely perceptible. In conclusion, in my report I've referred to Scottish planning policy, and at paragraph 4.11 there's a reference in there to Scottish planning policy which says that although development can raise, that's development of open cast coal, although development can raise significant environmental issues, extraction is necessary and important in the national interest. So whilst the loss of the conveyor is clearly regrettable, given the relatively limited impact of the proposal on the road network and the relatively short distance to the rail siding, the other significant benefits of the scheme merit a recommendation of approval.
Thank you, Pat. Any member have any questions or officers? Councillor Triborough?
Yeah, it's just coming to the recommendation, but recommendation 3, it's about the haulage statement is adjusted to include on every second cycle, blah, blah, blah. How could we, as a planning authority, enforce that?
Pat?
It's an enforceable condition in that it can be monitored, and therefore it is enforceable. So it's correct in terms of the planning tests for conditions. It would require monitoring, and certainly it's not intended that we would have a planning officer or enforcement officer at that site to monitor it on a daily basis. With much of our monitoring, we do look to members of the public to raise issues with us when things aren't working, and if it wasn't working, then we would respond to that. And also, as well, the further condition 4, requires that all of this be reviewed and monitored by the developer, such that after a period of 3 months, they can submit that information to the planning authority to ensure that there's an opportunity to review this in detail. That the traffic management plan relies very heavily on very precise timings, and that there may be flexing that is required within that. And so it is important in this case that there is an opportunity to review that in detail. And so that's provided for at that 3-month period.
Thanks, Pat. I hope by doing that we're not encouraging drivers to use mobile phones or CB radios.
It's a bit of clarity, and it's brought up in the representation thing. It's about the conveyor costs and the restoration bond, and I don't quite see one of the objectors says that, you know, the suggestion that if they minimise costs, Hargreaves this is, then they can maximise the restoration opportunities. How do you make that happen?
Pat?
Okay, thanks, Chair. The situation with restoration of Glenmucklock is outlined at paragraph 1.4, which says that the restoration bond for the Glenmucklock site was called in by the council, and that amounts to £8.15 million. Yeah, that is the maximum amount available to carry out the works for shifting all of the mud and material to reach an acceptable restoration level. If money can be saved by the operator, who is also carrying out the restoration of the site, then that saving can be built in to the restoration to ensure that maximum restoration levels are achieved within the site. The costs of the conveyor, as I said earlier, are in the region of £2 million to £2.1 million. That's information that was gleaned from the Rig North application that was approved by this committee back in 2012, I think it was.
Patsy, I think one of the problems was the cost of restoration far exceeded £8.125 million. That was the issue. And I think what's being said is the company, if they have to spend £2 million and they spend £1 million transporting coal by road, the other £1 million goes towards the difference between the total restoration, because this is only a partial restoration now, and depending upon how much money is available will be how much of a detailed restoration scheme that we'll eventually achieve. And I think there's also an opportunity to develop an energy part, but that's not a discussion for today, but that's part of the final outcome of the scheme that's proposed. Did you want to come back, Patsy?
I see that, but I don't see this restoration bond being increased in the recommendations. I mean, how do you enforce that happens?
Paul has offered to help.
I'm not trying to step on Pat's toes, but I actually did the contract for the restoration. The restoration as approved exceeds the bond amount. The developer is funding that from the extraction of the extension. So anything which affects the viability of that extraction, which I understand to be quite tight already, reduces what they can do from the cost of restoration they are bearing the burden of. And it becomes unviable for them if the costs become too high to carry out the restoration on the part that we cannot pay for. The restoration scheme as approved is considerably in excess of £8 million.
The guesstimate was 18. Councillor Geddes.
Is that, strictly speaking, sir, a valid planning consideration? Because it seems to me suspiciously like something akin to a horse trade. I don't know whether you would wish to answer that or whether the officer would wish to answer it, bearing in mind that we're not currently in session.
I think we'll get Pat to answer that.
Thanks, Chair. It's a justification that's been put forward by the applicant. The key considerations, as I alluded to earlier and set out in the report, are that, if you bear with me one moment, that at 413, that there's a relatively limited impact on the road network. It's a relatively short transportation distance, and the other significant benefits of the scheme, and they relate to the fact that coal will be extracted. Coal is needed in the national interest, and as a byproduct of that, restoration of the site is maximised.
Alistair, want to come back?
I'm not entirely sure, sir, whether or not the case officer has answered the question, but I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
I suppose the question might be, Pat, had the financial element not been introduced, would your recommendation have been the same?
I think it is worth considering a previous application, or bringing to the table a previous application that was considered by the Planning Applications Committee in 2006, I think it was, which was for Rig North. Rig North is the area of land identified by a red line. That site for extraction of coal at Rig North is bounded to the south by the A76 and to the north by the railway line. And because that site was able to access directly onto the A76, the recommendation, or that application was based on transporting coal by road. The recommendation by officers was to agree to allow transportation of coal by road in that circumstance, and that was supported by this committee. So there is clear precedent that where it can be appropriately achieved, then it can be acceptable. It's clearly beneficial to use the conveyor where possible, and it would be the preferred route to use the conveyor where possible. But given the overall picture, it's been considered acceptable to allow transportation in the case of Rig North and as recommended here.
Councillor Geddes.
Thanks, Chairman. Would the case officer accept, of course, that precedent guides us, it doesn't bind us?
I'm sure he will. Any other member for questions for officers at this time? In that case, we have 3 speakers, the applicants, Philip Rayson, Gary Ward and Alan Hiddleston. As this is a major application, you will have 5 minutes. Gentlemen, would you like to come to the table, please? There are little buttons to the right at the bottom of the console. If you press them, it will put your console speaker on. And whenever you're ready, gentlemen, you have 5 minutes, and I'll remind you 30 seconds before that your time is about due to be concluded.
Okay. Good afternoon, Chair, Committee. Thanks very much for the opportunity to speak to you today. My name is Philip Rayson. I'm the Planning Manager with Hargreaves Surface Mining Limited, and I've been accompanied today by 2 colleagues. That's Gary Ward, who's sitting at my far left, who's the Production Manager, and Alan Hiddleston, who's the Site Manager at Glen Mucklock. Should you have any technical questions, hopefully they'll be able to answer them today. I'd just like to say that Hargreaves Surface Mining acts as an agent for Glen Mucklock Restoration Limited, who is the landowner at Glen Mucklock, and that Hargreaves Surface Mining is also the contractor on site. A quick overview of Hargreaves Services Limited is a major public company employing nearly 3,000 people involved in all aspects of the coal industry. And over the last year, Hargreaves has worked with Dumfries and Galloway Council and other local authorities within Scotland. The Scottish Government, the Coal Authority, local communities and other stakeholders to try and address the issues, the many and varied issues that have resulted within the Scottish coal mining industry as a result of the failure and collapse and ultimate liquidation of both ATH and Scottish Coal. Hargreaves didn't create the solutions within the industry, but we are attempting to try and find solutions to try and put things right. Hargreaves have devoted much time and effort, incurred holding costs and other expenses across this and many other sites, and taken business risks and invested significant resources. All part of Hargreaves' plan to establish a long-time surface mining business across Scotland, and at Glen Mucklock specifically, we've addressed many of the issues, challenges and identified opportunities to promote and deliver a restoration solution to the original Glen Mucklock site, working closely with both Dumfries and Galloway Council, Buccleuch Estate, that's Glen Mucklock Restoration Limited, and other stakeholders, and we believe acted openly and in a spirit of cooperation. It's therefore very pleasing to read a clear and well-structured appraisal of the proposals in the Planning Officer's report. I think it's important to stress that this application before you today is to amend the current permitted coal mining operations at Glen Mucklock to allow the transportation of coal and not the fundamental principle of working coal at the site. Approval of this amendment will ensure the delivery of a revised restoration plan that includes a progressive managed solution to the coal revenue to support this, the continued working of the coal reserve, using the existing planning permission that's in place, and also the continued employment of 54 people currently on site for a further 1.5 years before we move on to hopefully the Rig South and Rig North applications. I don't really want to run through the full details of the application because I think they've been quite well set out in Mr. Hannah's report, but I think it is important to point out just a couple of things from the slides that we were shown, and one particular fact. The last coal exported from the site was in December 2012, and that went over the conveyor, and that was when ATH was still in existence and still operating the site. No coal's left the site since that date. And on the slide which showed the lorry by the bridge over the railway, that lorry there, which was indicated, is actually a 28-ton lorry with 10 wheels. The proposal is to use smaller lorries, which are 20-ton lorries with 8 wheels. So if the lorries certainly aren't to that scale. Finally, I'd just like to remind you that the application before you is for to revise the coal transportation methods from the Glen Mucklock site to allow road haulage to the railhead at Crowbandsgate in New Cumnock. The application has been made out of necessity as a result of the situation that's presented itself following the failure of the previous operator. Hargreaves has stepped into the site as a contractor to safeguard 54 jobs with a view to working closely with Dumfries and Galloway Council and the landowner to develop a revised scheme which can be delivered to allow the remaining coal to be worked and assist in the overall restoration scheme for Glen Mucklock. The application is supported by a transport management plan and also an assessment of road traffic noise. The application has received 2 objections, one from the neighbouring local authority, East Ayrshire, and one from an objector not resident within the area. The issues they raise have adequately been addressed in the committee report and in the main concentrate on the potential impacts on the local road network. However, it's been acknowledged that there is no objection from either Transport Scotland or Dumfries and Galloway's own Roads Department, nor Dumfries and Galloway's Environmental Health Department to the proposed application, subject to the imposition of certain planning conditions and also the conclusion of a legal agreement. Therefore, for the following reasons, I hope you'll be able to support the application. If you have any questions, we're more than willing to answer them.
Thanks for that, Philip. Any members have any questions for the agent? Given that you proposed to remove the coal by road, will that create additional employment opportunities for locals?
Depending on who the coalage contractor that is ultimately used to haul the coal, then yes, it would. The intention is to go out to a tender to all companies within the area.
Thanks for that, okay. Okay, in that case, would you mind resuming your seats, please? Thank you. Okay, members, we are in session. If there are no observations, are we happy to agree the officer recommendation? Thanks very much for that. Paula, will you confirm the decision, please?
Committee is determined to approve the committee is determined to approve the application as set out in the report.
Thanks, Paula. We now come to item number 8. Internal alterations to remove wall at Kirtland of Redrick, Dundrennan. The application is a listed building consent. The applicants, Mr. and Mrs. Maitland. The recommendation is to approve unconditionally, and the case officer is Robert Duncan. Robert, will you take us through your presentation, please?
Thank you, Chair. Obviously, this application is before you today due to member interest. Taking you through the slides. The application site is, excuse me, it's just to the west of Dundrennan Abbey, which you can see on the right-hand side. It's a detached Category B listed building, and this is obviously, it's on the southern edge of Dundrennan village. Closer view shows the property Kirtland of Redrick, and you have an existing floor plan. The intention is to provide an opening between the 2 rooms that you see, the study and the living room, and that shows the detail of it. Essentially, as described in the report, it's to create an opening, put a beam in, and then put a couple of layers of plasterboard on exposed edges, but designed such that it will not affect the cornice detailing within these rooms. And that's looking at it in a cross-sectional form, so you'll see it's actually below the level of that cornicing that's represented above. And that's a detail of the beam, again showing the relationship to the cornice detailing. There's really, I mean, the photographs will show it, but there's really little other affected in terms of architectural detailing within here. So you're looking at the view of the wall from the study, which is the rear room of the 2, if you like. The opening would be in that wall on the right-hand side, and the opposite side, which is the living room, a more decorative cornice there, but obviously the intended opening would come beneath that, so that actually wouldn't be affected. And you're looking at quite a plain wall feature at the moment. As per the officer's report, the recommendation is to grant, approve listed building consent, and as per the report at 4.5, this type of proposal does not formally require to be referred to Historic Scotland before a decision is issued. So your decision today would be the final one in respect of this application. Thanks.
Thank you, Robert. Councillor Geddes? No questions for officers at the moment. No questions for officers. Thanks. For now in session. Councillor Geddes?
Would you regard it, or would you regard me as being mischievous, or if I referred back to item number 5 on the agenda earlier on today, when we were given a lecture in best nanny mode about whether or not we could appreciate, as it were, the implications of certain proposals in relation to such as listed buildings. Here's a case in point, and I've never been too proud to admit gaps in my knowledge. Perhaps we should be considering a site visit in this instance. And if you're not prepared to consider me being mischievous, Chairman, I'm tempted to move. That's exactly what we do.
I hope that's recorded somewhere. If you're minded to approve, is anybody otherwise minded?
I said it, sir, in the full knowledge and the full hope that it would be recorded.
Thanks for that, Councillor Geddes. If no one's otherwise minded, then we'll approve the application. Paula, can you confirm your decision, please?
Committee is determined to approve the application unconditionally.
No other business, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks very much for your forbearance and for the light-hearted finish.